709 Reasons Why is brought to you by Calman.
Hi, I'm David with Portrait Displays, and welcome to another episode of 709 Reasons Why. On today's episode, we have Jim Peterson from Lumagen on the show. Jim, thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Jim, for our viewers out there, can you tell us a little bit about Lumagen, the history of Lumagen, who you guys are and what you guys do?
I'd be happy to do that. So we started Lumagen in 2001, and we have been designing, manufacturing video processors in the USA for 24 years now, 23 years. So we have been around, and we've gone from a field of many companies doing video processing to just a couple now. And so we have been focusing on studio reference quality video. From the early days, we started with SD outputting HD, and then we're up to 4K in and out, and we're going to be announcing a product, or we have announced a product that is 8K in and out.
You mentioned saying SD to HD was one of the things you started with. So that was taking, what, 480i, 480p content and converting that up to 720p, 1080i, 1080p? Is that what you were doing?
That's correct, yeah. So we started with that and some very basic rudimentary calibration. Back in that day, it was color filters, blue filters for calibration, so color and hue. And we started with that, but we did scaling, we did deinterlacing. Deinterlacing at that time was very, very critical. And so we focused a lot on deinterlacing, we focused a lot on quality scaling.
Okay.
So for in-motion video, scaling quality is a little different than if you're doing a photo scaler. So we have been working on those algorithms for 24 years.
Wow. And so for our viewers out there, the reason you might want to do this is because you would be taking, back then, it would be content really designed for a television, right? At 480i, which means you have, was it about 720 by 480 resolution?
Yes.
And you'd be watching that on TV. It would look fine, but as you blew that up into a big projection system where you have maybe a 10-foot screen, that resolution started to look really soft. Right, and so so people would buy these processors and they would do that up converting, as we would call it, to make it appear sharper. Couldn't really make more detail than was already on the master, but you could at least make it appear more film-like, if you would.
It was a key feature to a lot of the quality we did early on was because people complained their television, their 1080 television, looked worse than their 480 television because the scaling in the television, the video processing in the television was not very good. So we focused on improving that and striving for studio reference quality. That was always what our goal was.
So studio reference quality in the home. So today, what are the use cases as the processing world has evolved? And now, today, a lot of things aren't SD, right? A lot of things are HD or Ultra HD. So now we're not having really the master having low resolution per se, unless you're watching legacy content. And even legacy content, for the most part, there's a lot of remasters, right? They've rescanned the film. They've come out with UHD movies from many years ago, and it looks really sharp and really clean. So now we've got that higher resolution. So now what are the use cases you find today that customers really want a video processor? Is the detail and the resolution, the image processing, the scaling still a thing, or has it really moved into other areas of where people focus on when they purchase something like this?
That's a common question. That's a very good question. Typically, one of the key use cases for the Lumagen is aspect ratio adjustment. So if you've got an anamorphic projector driving an anamorphic screen without an anamorphic lens, you need to scale, and even if you have an anamorphic lens, you need to scale that content to fit the screen based on the raster of the projector, typically being 16 by 9. So if you have a 240 screen, no anamorphic lens, you have to do scaling to make all that fit. One of the key things that Lumagen does is we did instant auto aspect detection and selection. So we automate that process so the user doesn't have to select aspect ratios anymore. That's a key feature, but that requires really good scaling. And all our algorithms are tuned for in-motion video so that as you're sitting at viewing distance, you want to minimize any artifacts created by the scaling, improve the quality of the image as much as you can. We do have some features like edge enhancement. We do have a feature called Darby for scaling up 1080 or 480 stuff that the Darby enhances that feature. We have the edge enhancement enhances the feature. So there's more than scaling involved in that. But scaling is still key at 4K
So the Darby, I remember hearing about this, and I remember actually looking at one, I think early when they came out. The Darby was its own processor, right? That was really meant about enhancing the image, making it look crisper, sharper, cleaner. Is that right? And Lumagen has taken that technology from Darby and implemented that inside of its video processor, inside the Lumagen.
Yes, yeah, we took their design, put it in the Lumagen, and used it as a piece of the puzzle to improve the quality of the video. So Darby set at a low setting with our edge enhancement is a very good way to take 1080 or 480 content and show it on a very large 4K screen and have it look as good as it possibly can.
Okay, so many steps to the video processing path. So this really isn't a video processor in general, whether it's Lumagen or some other video processor, really isn't a one-trick pony. These things are very, very powerful tools that can do many things. You mentioned about aspect ratio. And so one of the things I think I see in home theaters and what I've seen in my years of calibrating has been the drive towards widescreens. And we see people going towards a 235 or a 239, what people might refer to as like a scope screen, because the height of the room and the viewing rows. So you end up with the laws of physics, right? You only have so much height, and if you want to get that really cinematic experience in your room, you got to start going wider because you're running out of that height in your room. And the other thing is, if you have multiple rows, this row has to be able to see over this row. Yes. And if you're 16 by 9, you got more height, that means those rows have to be more dramatic. And a lot of home theaters aren't really that dramatic. So we often see people going with those cinematic screens, not just for the physics of it, but a lot of movies are also shot widescreen, right? So now you're watching the movie at the native aspect ratio, in your home theater with as large a screen, as cinematic experience, if you will.
So when we first started doing aspect ratio control like that, we would often have it set up. The dealer would want to say, I want to set this up for zoom and shift, and I want to set it up for the Lumagen doing all of the aspect ratio control, because the customer says they want zoom and shift. But we found the customer always picked the Lumagen doing the aspect ratio control because it was instant aspect ratio control. And now we have the instant auto aspect where we'll detect and we will set the aspect ratio instantly for the customer, doesn't have to do anything. So one of the key features of a video processor like the Lumagen, it's designed to be set up and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. It does everything without you having to do any control. We do offer multiple memories if you want to have a day or a night, or if you wanted to set up a zoom in and chip for football days, then you could do that. But because when I do zoom and shift on my projector, which is a very high-end, excellent projector, every single time I have to go manually focus and manually position it because it's just not quite accurate enough. With the Lumagen, that's all gone.
And that's just gotten really good. I know I've looked at that on video processors myself, and one of the things I really like about that feature is things like the Apple TV and the Kaleidoscape, where you for our viewers at home, you go into these 235 modes, and a lot of times you want to bring up the menu or you want to pause and search. Well, the pause and search is in that black bar. If you're familiar looking at your TV, it'd be on the bottom of the screen. And so you wouldn't be able to see it because you'd be zoomed out. You'd be in this 235 mode and that part of the image is off the screen because now you're native. And what a lot of these auto systems are now doing is you can bring up the menu and it sees that there's now content there and it adjusts. So you can see what you're doing, move to where you want to go in the movie, and then it auto detects again and brings it back out. So now you don't have to kind of constantly hit buttons, because 10 years or so ago, we would have customers that would be like, oh, I got to bring up the menu, and they'd have a menu button. And the menu button would change the zoom, but the masking would stay. So you didn't have the masking systems always coming in, going out, coming in, going out while you're trying to look at the menu. And then they would hit the button again and it would bring it back out and then they'd watch their movie. But today it's just gotten so sophisticated with things like this where you can just really have it automated and you don't have to really think about it very much. So I really appreciate where the industry's going.
And that instant auto aspect is probably second only to our HDR dynamic tone mapping that we do in our processing to make HDR look good on, say, a 100 nit projector. HDR is designed and mastered at either 1,000 nits or 4,000 nits for most movies. And what we can do is we have to remap that in real time to 100 nit or less, or maybe a 200 nit projector. So HDR has become a very important feature. It's just one of many, but it is kind of maybe the most important feature for the video processor today.
Yeah, and that's where I get excited about a lot of this stuff because I'm just a video geek, but I really get excited about the tone mapping aspect, and it's really baffling to me. For what we're referring to is when you're looking at high dynamic range content, right? Whether it's Dolby Vision or HDR, anything that's high dynamic range, it's mastered on a monitor that might be 1,000 plus nits, right? It can go anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 nits. Most content today is between 1,000 and 4,000 nits. But most projectors, right, aren't going to do 1,000 nits or 4,000 nits. And even if they could do that, the surface area of the screen is so large that it becomes blindingly bright at times. So it's not what we call perceptually accurate to the mastering suite. Because in the mastering suite, you're looking at maybe a 30-inch or so monitor when you're mastering content. So it's a small field of view. So 1,000 nits over 30 inches is a lot different than 1,000 nits over 100 inches or 200 inches, right? And so what ends up happening in the home theater is we try to play back content mastered on a TV or mastered on a television type display, mastering monitor, on a large projection format, which is more meant for cinema exhibition. And we have this mismatch. The mastering monitor and the exhibition format don't match up exactly. So there's got to be image processing or tone mapping like you're talking about, where how bright can my projector go, what's my contrast ratio, and then how do I track as close to the artist's intent so I'm watching it as accurate as I possibly can. And that gets me so excited. So do you think, what do you think the future is? So right now I see, and I know if you talk to the CEDIA channel, right, the custom integration organizations throughout the world, mostly CEDIA, right, we see a lot of home theaters that are getting high-end projection systems getting an image processor along with it. Do you think the future ever takes this kind of powerful technology and integrates it directly into the projector? Are we going to see the future being still one of there's good processing in these projection systems, but if you really want it, I think you had mentioned to me one time, you said, a good projector is like a very good wine, but you put a projector with a great wine, and that's a video processor. Yes. Something you want to come back to, something you want to keep watching because you're like, man, this thing just looks so great. And do you think that's ever going to get integrated where we're going to see the marriage of those two and we've got those great processors inside those projectors, or is it always going to stay separated? Well,
my personal opinion is I'm surprised that video projector companies have not come to us to do that because it's FPGA based, it's small and integratable into a projector. Okay. And so I'm surprised that they haven't come and wanted to integrate. And so here's a pitch to all the projector companies out there. Sure. Yeah, we're able to integrate the Lumagen because it is field programmable gate array based into a projector. It would make very good sense.
So then you would just go straight in the projector, all the adjustability and customizations would be inside the projector. Right. You wouldn't need the external processor, but you get all the benefits of it.
Right. So, Lumagen has 45 man years, I figure, of expertise developing dynamic tone mapping, instant auto aspect, all the features that we have that a company wouldn't have to reproduce if they get the Lumagen, and they can focus on the light engine, which is where their expertise really is. So we see a lot of projectors that have very good light engines that you put a Lumagen in front of, and then you get an amazing result.
I think we see so many projectors, and not to say, different manufacturers have different levels of processing and adjustability, but one of the things I think projector manufacturers have really gotten really well is if you know how to do it, you can calibrate most projectors very well when it comes to color and it comes to luminance and EOTF tracking and all of this. But it's the image processing where we still find, at least in my own work, I still find the image processing, I still want some of the hooks I get in an image processor that's external. I still want to do some of the advanced things I can't quite do in just a projector that's off the shelf. But I can typically get a really good calibration with most projectors out there without much issue. And speaking of calibration, I think if I don't mention that the Lumagen works really well with Calman, I would be getting scolded by our marketing team. But the Lumagen does work really well if you want to fine-tune a projection system with Calman, where we'll talk to the multi-point, so you can create a 1D lookup table. We'll also do a 3D lookup table, so we can do some of that gamut mapping for systems that might need it. right? There certainly are projection systems that we might be able to get better results or slightly better results out there using the fine-tuning of Calman and the Lumagen processor. But I really think where this shines for someone like me is the things we've talked about. We've talked about like the auto aspect ratio control. We've talked about the tone mapping and being able to really fine-tune this calibration on that level. And I just don't always find that in the commercially available projection systems without a processor. And you know, honestly, there are a lot of projection companies that actually recommend these. So that's another thing, right?
Yes.
Whether it's this or another, it's video processor, a very big prevalent thing among the video projection world. So one day we might see this integrate with the projector. What's the future of Lumagen? What do you got? What do you got?
Well,
coming?
before I go there, I would like to talk about a couple more features.
Oh, sure.
Genlock for lip sync. If you want studio reference quality lip sync, you need a Lumagen if you're going to get a video processor, because we have accurate Genlock, which basically keeps the delay through the video processor constant. In addition, we have a game mode. With Genlock, it's 3 milliseconds in to out. So gamers are actually able to use the Lumagen with processing to do their gaming. So we have just a lot of different features inside. And one of the key features is for our high-end clientele, they don't want to know anything about what's going on in the system. They want to turn it on, and then when they want to press play. And so the Lumagen is about, you do a setup, professionally calibrated. I always recommend professional calibration. And that gets you to the next level. The colors are just going to be a little richer. The current projectors are pretty good. They're pretty linear. They calibrate well. And then if you get a Lumagen, you can do just that next level of calibration. So what the future is we have talked about publicly our Artisan video processing, which is going to be 8K in and 8K out. Now, I'm not a proponent for 8K consumer sources, because with bits being the indicator of, you know, getting it down the stream to the consumer, you can do an extremely good job with 4K. So I'm all about better 4K for sources, but there will be 8K sources.
Okay.
Also, gamers are loving the idea of the Lumagen being able to do 4K 120 in and out with a game mode at 3 milliseconds with a fixed Genlock delay. And so that is a feature that is very, I think, important for high-end gamers. They want that feature. 8K out can be good because you can do oversampling, just like audio is oversampled. You can oversample video. We'll be able to output 8K. Okay. And then 8K in, 8K sources will be here. There's various companies talking about doing 8K. I'm not really a huge supporter for 8K content, but it's going to be here, and we wanted to be able to support it.
Yeah, there's a movement in Hollywood when they talk about 8K, you know, a lot of people will say better pixels, not more pixels.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Better quality pixels, right?
Yeah, and that's the better 4K movement. And also filmmaker mode is a key thing. You know, motion interpolation in the film industry is basically, people very much dislike it because it just doesn't work, especially with the kind of processing power. So we are very big advocates for filmmaker mode, which is show the movie as the director intended, and as part of being studio reference quality.
Awesome. Yeah, and you know what? That's what we're about too. We're about accuracy and showing it just as the artist intended, and making sure we get that lens to living room story exactly right. So whether you're on the set, in the grading suite, or watching it at home, you're getting exactly what the artist intended.
And we really appreciate all that Calman has done to improve the interface with the Lumagen to make it, like as you say, that the integrators, the calibrators are very happy with the pairing, so that they can do a really accurate calibration and get the very best quality. So I use Calman because it's easy to use. I don't calibrate a lot. I calibrate my projector maybe once a year, and I don't need it, so it's really nice. I fire it up, I run my calibration, and it's easy to use. The profiles are great, very, very good user interface. So I do appreciate all the work you've done to make that interface work well with the Lumagen.
Oh, you're welcome, and we appreciate working with Lumagen. Our customers love working with Calman and the Lumagen, and so we're very happy to be able to bring a solution to market that works easy and effectively and giving those best-in-class results. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show. If people wanted to learn more about Lumagen, where could they learn more about this stuff?
Well, the best thing I think to start with is lumagen.com. So we've just redone our website, And it is a huge step up. We had a 20-year-old website because we did it early on, and we've redone it. And there, you can learn more about video, about how our in-motion scaling is different than a lot of other people are doing. It's intended to be, evaluated at viewing distance, and that's, I think, why we win comparisons. If you do blind comparisons with the Lumagen always wins. At least I'm told that. And so we are very much focused on continuing the legacy of our current product generation into the Artisan.
Okay. All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great talking to you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of 709 Reasons Why. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.